This lesson is on reading the information from a file on your hard drive using PHP and then displaying the contents of that file in a browser window. Notice I'm starting at a different place than I usually start these lessons. I'm showing you a directory structure. Specifically, when you install either WAMP or MAMP, you're going to have a www directory or folder where your programs will lie. Your HTML, your PHP, these are the things we've been running. However, I created a new folder here called Data. I just made that up. It didn't come automatically when I installed WAMP or MAMP. So you have to put that folder in there. Now, within that folder, I created a couple files, but we're going to concentrate on this one here called cities.txt. I just used a plain text editor like TextPad, or Text Wrangler is a good one on the Mac, and I put some data in here. Let me open this up. So I have 3 cities, Chicago, Detroit, Toronto. I'm going to use this file to change the way things display. So instead of hardwiring my browser code to display a new city and I have to go in and change some HTML, I'm going to read from this file and display different HTML based on what we find in this file. Let's go ahead and look at some code now. And here we are in the reading file program. Now I'm going to go down and I'm going to go to the code that reads the file and sets this up. The first thing you see here is on the right side of the equal sign, we have something called the $server. This is a global variable. So is $post for that matter. And they're special super globals, they call them, that you need to understand and use in your programming. Now, what we want to do is we want to get essentially a pointer to where the directory is, the root directory where you're keeping your programs. So we pass it this parameter called document root. And then I'm storing it in a variable that's traditional. Essentially, I could have called this anything, but it's traditional to call it $document root. Let's take just a quick moment and look up super globals in the php.net site. So here we are, php.net. I told you this is a place you're going to want to come many times. And I'm going to type in the word super globals. 2 words, really. And that's not really a function, so I'm going to look in the online documentation. Hit the little arrow key and go to the manual on superglobals. These are predefined variables in PHP, and they're available through all the functions, all the code, anywhere in PHP. There's no issues of scope, which we're going to learn more about later. But if you already understand the concept, these are globally available. We've already used this $post to get information off HTML forms. And we're now using the $server to get a pointer to the directory where our programs lie, at the root. Now we could have gone deeper in, but I put all the programs at the root for now. There are other super globals, such as request and session, and some things that we might use at other parts in the program. But for now, I want you to be aware that these exist. Back to the code. So this is going to get a pointer to essentially the www directory. When this comes back, it'll have a / appended on the end of it. So I don't need to add that, but I want to get down to the data directory because that's 1 level deep. And that's the way you do this. You put a /, you're going 1 level deep from the directory that you're in, which is our root directory. So I added another / because I want to go in and look at the cities.txt file. I could have run this all together. I chose to kind of break it out just to make it clearer. Now, that I've stored in a variable called $filename. I like to construct my file names and put them in a variable before using them in the PHP file functions that we're going to learn about. I find it easier to do it that way. Now, one of the things that I can do now is I want to know how many lines are in my file. Now, a line ends, if I were typing in a file, let's go back to the cities file, would be like if I hit the return key and started typing something else. That would add a new line in there, a \n, but it's hidden. You don't get to see that. In the file itself, behind the scenes, as a hidden code, there's a \n wherever I hit the enter key. So that's how it knows where a new line begins. It looks for this \n behind the scenes. It looks at the file and it counts them and it brings back this variable. I just made the variable name up called lines in files. That's the number of lines I have. And I'm going to use that because I want to run a for loop. And with the lines in file, then I know how many times to run the for loop because I want to process one line in the file at a time. So now, here's the file functions. The first one you need is called the fopen, short for file open. You pass it two parameters or two arguments. It's $file name, whatever the name of the file is that you want to open, and then a comma, and then you give it one of these parameters. The one we're going to use is just a small r, and that opens the file for reading. There are some other ones we're going to learn about for writing in the next lesson. All right, so now that we have all this, on the left side of the equal sign, it returns something into this $fp variable. I set up $fp is short for file pointer. We don't ever have to worry about what the value is being stored in there, but we have to use this variable with other file writing and reading commands, or rather other file or reading functions. So we can operate what we need to operate to get PHP to work with a file. So let's look at the for loop. $ii equals 1. $ii is less than or equal to the lines in the file. And we bump $ii up by 1 through every iteration of the loop. So this isn't doing too much. Here's how you read a line. It's a kind of an unusual thing, but it's fgets. Now it knows what file to read by looking at the file pointer that we created when we opened the file. So you do that and it reads one line from the file. And I chose to put it in a variable, return it into a variable called $line. Now, just to be on the safe side, I trim that line. That gets rid of any white space on the left or right side of it. I want to make sure that I didn't inadvertently put anything in there when I was typing in those cities. So now I pull that back and I return it into $city. So now I can print city equals $city break. When I'm done with this loop, I've done this every time for all the lines in the file. After I'm done, I do an fclose on the file pointer, and that closes the file off cleanly. Go down, I don't really have any more code. Now you notice, I didn't start this with an HTML file. This is a PHP file. Once again, to remind you, a PHP file is an HTML file that may have some PHP code in it. Let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to open it up here. Now, of course, you see this junk in here because I'm not yet running on the local host. So I've got to overwrite this. Now it says localhost, and I'm going to hit the enter key. So now I ran it. It says city, Chicago, Detroit, Toronto. It's got all three cities listed. So the code ran. It worked. If I were to go back and add a line to the file, let's go ahead and do that now. I'll put in Los Angeles. I'm going to hit the enter key because I want that break to be there. I want that new line character to be there. Let's try running it again. And I can run it again just by reloading the page. There it is. It added it automatically. So as I add or take lines out of that file, I'm going to get different results printed on the browser. Once again, PHP, that's the whole point. They get something different to display on the page, either based on what the user enters or based on some data in a file or in a database.